right there. Do want to get to another hot topic here in northern Colorado, and it's the National Defense Authorization Act. And of course, on Tuesdays, we also, first Tuesday of the month, we check in with our good friend, Rob Natelson, who is constitutional scholar at the Independence Institute. And Rob, you've already weighed in on this subject before. We've touched on it. But because of a resolution that the Weld County Commissioners, they introduced it and have voted on it, this subject is coming up against again. Have you had the opportunity to see that resolution that the Weld County Commissioners submitted or introduced and then approved?
Yes, I have, Amy, and in light of today's show, I should make clear I am not a candidate for anything.
Other than just preeminent constitutional scholar. That you fit into that one.
I see. Well, thank you.
All right, so you had a chance to look at the resolution.
Yes.
And what is your take on that?
I don't think it's strong enough. I mean, the resolution talks about the fact, and this is true, that normally prosecution for crimes committed in the United States are undertaken by the normal civilian authorities. That makes this sound like a jurisdictional fight. Okay, this goes far beyond that. The National Defense Authorization Act, its primary threat is to individual liberty. I mean, to the jury trial guaranteed by the Sixth Amendment, to the writ of habeas corpus guaranteed by Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution. It's about individual liberty, not what set of courts should have jurisdiction over a particular case. And I think they lost an opportunity to state the case in far more ringing terms than they did.
Let's get to the National Defense Authorization Act. Refresh listeners' memory what it is and why you are so concerned about it, or the portion of the National Defense Authorization Act that, and frankly, all of us should be concerned about.
Yeah, it's sections 1021 and 1022 mostly. The Act purports to be a clarification of the original resolution that was passed after 9/11, whereby the President was given authorization for the use of military force. It was essentially a declaration of war against the Taliban and against other terrorists around the world. So it purports to be this clarification. But what it does is state that the President is authorized to incarcerate American citizens for the duration of the war on terror if those American citizens are suspected of engaging in terrorist acts or affiliation or substantial aid to certain named organizations like the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. As has been pointed out, the President can dispose of prisoners in other ways, too. He can send them over for a civilian trial, for example. But what's important is that the President has the power to detain people suspected of these activities without regard to where they were apprehended, even if they're apprehended in the United States, without regard to their citizenship or their status as a legal alien, and without regard to where it is alleged that the crimes were committed. Obviously, this is a measure that strikes at the heart of liberties that Englishmen and Americans have held dear for 700 years.
Rob, how come there are such differing interpretations of this? How come, for instance, Congress says, oh, no, that is not accurate. And by the way, we have this language that says the government cannot detain anyone. I mean, how come there are these differing interpretations? What is it that one side is looking at? For instance, I had Congressman Gardner on the show, and he said, no, that language was clarified and talks about a conference committee. I mean, I know you can't get into their minds, but are we even speaking the same language?
I think they're just flat wrong. I mean, I did not hear that show, Amy, unfortunately, but I did read over the defense that Congressman Garner made, which you forwarded to me. And one of the items of defense, for example, is pointing out that the Weld County resolution doesn't mention that the president doesn't have to detain people without trial. He can hand them over to the civilian authorities. Well, that's true, but so what? I mean, if you've granted the power to the president to detain people without trial indefinitely for the duration of the conflict, then the fact that the president can, if he chooses, do something else is really not much of a reassurance. Or, for example, he pointed out the fact that the resolution does not purport to contradict earlier law or authorities, and the authorities usually thought of here are Supreme Court decisions. And then he goes, but that's cold comfort, because you don't have Supreme Court decisions that say the obvious, that is, that American citizens and resident aliens apprehended in this country have the right to trial. You don't have really a full panoply of those decisions, because presidents generally have not acted arrogantly enough to start rounding up American decisions. Congressman Gardner also said that in a 2004 decision, which I think he means the Hamby decision, said that Americans have the right to habeas corpus. American citizens have the right to habeas corpus. No, it didn't say that.
What does it say?
What it said was that an American citizen captured overseas, engaging in hostilities against the United States, in other words, an enemy combatant, had no right to habeas corpus. What he has the right to is a military hearing on the question of whether he, in fact, is an enemy combatant. It simply did not say that an American citizen has a right to habeas corpus. It said that he doesn't. Two justices of the court, Scalia and Stevens, quite rightly said that if we capture an American citizen engaged in hostilities against the United States, the proper disposition is to indict him and try him on a charge of treason, not lock him up in a military prison for the duration of hostilities, which in this case are probably going to extend to the crack of doom, because there's always a terror threat out there.
And that brings up another...
These folks, I mean, I don't mean to infringe Congressman Gardner's integrity or his good faith or anything else, but he's flat mistaken about this.
I want to ask, why don't we try these people for treason? If they are enemy combatants, and we have determined that, why are they detained indefinitely?
They're detained indefinitely because it's more convenient for the executive branch to do that. If you've got a trial for treason, that means you've got to impanel a jury of 12 American citizens. You've got to have the trial in this country rather than, let's say, in a quickie hearing in Guantanamo. You have to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, which the Hamby decision said you don't have to do if you've simply got a quickie military hearing for an alleged enemy combatant. And the government has to conduct this in an open hearing, and of course there are, and I will give the government credit, it's correct, there are real inconveniences with doing that, because you may have to have testimony, for example, that you don't want the bad guys to hear. I'm not saying that the government has no points. I'm saying those points have been resolved by the United States Constitution, and that requires that people like this be tried for hearing, because that's necessary for liberty. Sometimes liberty is inconvenient. Sometimes freedom is inconvenient. But that's
so
what the Constitution says. Yeah.
I can't believe I can't just run everything, but it's... Hey.
I know. I mean, if we set up a dictatorship under AmyOliver, it would undoubtedly be a better and more efficient form of government.
I'd be a benevolent dictator.
You certainly would, and so does every other dictator who's ever taken the mantle, think that he or she would be a benevolent dictator. But the fact is that's not our system, and it's not our system for very, very good reasons. Look, when our founders objected to the kinds of random searches that the TSA is now inflicting on American citizens, the founders acknowledged that a random search might be a better way to find contraband. It might be a better way to to ferret out smugglers. But they also recognize that random searches are contrary to the rights of free people.
Hey,
and so they set the balance in favor of freedom.
We have to take a quick break. But, Rob, coming back, you talked about the resolution. You mentioned the resolution that Weld County did, and you actually would like to see something or mention that it could be stronger. I just want to throw out there this idea. What can people do to show their dissatisfaction with the National Defense Authorization Act? And do you anticipate some kind of a court case on this? We'll continue our conversation with Rob Natelson, Independence Institute constitutional scholar, in just a moment. .55, the time in the Mountain Time Zone, and we are almost out of time, and I'm going to ask Rob right now. I'm going to put you on the spot, Rob. We need to have you back on very soon to talk about this. Hopefully you're around.
Some people would say I am rather round.
Well, I'm going to get a hold of you later on this afternoon and see if we can do it for one day this week. You don't have to say it right now, because this is a huge issue. We passed the resolution here, and this is an issue that is really sort of a burr in the saddle of many people, not just in northern Colorado, but I think throughout the country. And so my last question to you, Rob, is what can people do? I mean, you said this resolution doesn't go far enough. Well, what would?
I think what people need to do first is to open up their Constitution and look at the Sixth Amendment. Read the Sixth Amendment. That's the right of American citizens and resident aliens and people legally in this country if accused of crime. Okay? That's the place to start. And that Sixth Amendment needs to be referred to and incorporated into the resolution.
Well, we will look for that. And you know what we'll probably do is actually read it on the air the next time we can bring you on. And hopefully we can work out a day this week to bring you back. But read it on the air.
And Amy, we can address at that time what we do about the people who voted for this thing.
Boy, there's another great topic. Rob, thanks so much for being here. We're going to look forward to picking up this conversation again with Rob Natelson, the constitutional scholar at the Independence Institute. In the meantime, on the Amy Oliver Show Facebook page, I have a link to Rob's detailed analysis of the National Defense Authorization Act. So you can check it out there, as well as going to constitution.i2i.org. I will not be